We're there. It's going.
Okay, we're live. Welcome to Fearless Flight Live. This is the show that if you're afraid to fly, or you know somebody who's afraid to fly, or you just like to know and stay updated on what's going on in aviation, every Tuesday, 6:30 Pacific, we're with Captain Eric Larson and Flight Attendant Diane, and still no Captain Ron. I was going to say, where's Waldo? But where is Captain Ron? Captain Ron is currently in Europe, in Denmark, visiting with, I think we can call a former fearful flyer at this point. And they are trekking through the Danish hinterland to find some of Captain Ron's ancestors. And with my help, I think they've tracked down a couple people. So welcome to the show, Captain Eric and Diane. How are you guys?
Wonderful, warm.
Yeah.
Compared to the rest of the country.
Well,
Yes.
all glad to be in Phoenix.
That's and that's actually the main part of our show today, because we've obviously gotten a lot of questions about what's going on. And over the last few days, altogether over 10,000 flights have been canceled in North America. So that is massive, unprecedented weather all across North America. As a matter of fact, I'm down here in Mexico right now, and if you're tuning in from Canada, you're probably aware there's a lot of Canadians stuck down here in Cancun for the past several days, and I think they've just this afternoon started clearing up that backlog of people for days spending time at the airport or being transported from one hotel to the next. But that's actually really what I want to focus in today, because we've always tried to present a full, the story from all sides. And I know a lot of people are quite angry at airlines canceling lots of flights, and so we want to maybe present an angle and insights tonight that you may or may not be aware of. And so I'm gonna turn it over to you, Captain Eric. What do we know about Southwest, and what's been going on? Because they seem to have canceled a lot of flights even today, and people are very upset about it. But what's actually going on there?
Well, I'll give you a big overview, a giant overview, and you guys cut me off whenever, because if we have questions and stuff, I want to get right to those, and Diane will have things to add. But what happened, unless you lived in a cave, you're quite aware, is this extreme amount of severe weather that they referred to as a bomb cyclone. We used to just call it extreme amounts of severe weather. Came in as a polar vortex from the north and just came at the northern half of the country from the northwest and cut essentially across, the system moved essentially across the top half of North America with very cold temperatures, extreme amounts of snowfall, and very high winds. So this is pretty harsh weather, and it was a widespread, long-lasting system. And as it moved across the country, it impacted one airport after another airport after another airport. And our friends at Southwest were particularly struck by this, because two of their major hubs are number one, Denver, which really took a beating, and also Chicago Midway, which is a unique airport in Chicago. The other airlines in Chicago had their own issues to deal with because the weather hit them all the same. But Chicago Midway is a 1 mile square hunk of real estate in the middle of Chicago. And Southwest has basically taken that over for their operation, and it works really well for them. But there's a limited amount of real estate when you're trying to push extreme amounts of snow and de-ice and move airplanes. It really handcuffs them with the area of that they have to deal with there. What added to their problems was, I talked to a couple of my friends there, was their system, their computer system that tracks crews, flight attendants and pilots particularly. And it does essentially very fast string calculations. And when a trip cancels, it quickly looks at the crew on the airplane and goes, okay, whatever trips they're on, I'm breaking them into one-day trips and deadheading them to another station to pick up and start flying it. So when this happened in Denver, as the weather system came across and flights canceled, it would quickly assume and rebook the crews in that airplane. They would then go to another airplane that they were supposed to get on and deadhead, and that flight would cancel. And then it would rebuild this string for the people that went there to deadhead, plus the new crews. And it became an exponential growth as these flights canceled, of the computer just faster and faster building new trips and deadheads for flights that were canceled, were not going to make it, and or the crews that were trying to get into position to fly those trips couldn't make it. Adding to their,
I just want to throw in for the terminology, for a lot of people don't know, some people do, what deadhead means. Deadhead means you've got pilots and or flight attendants. Sometimes it's an entire crew. Sometimes it's just the pilot. Sometimes it's just the flight attendants, and maybe just one flight attendant. But deadheading means we're somewhere at an airport, but our company needs us to be somewhere else. And they need us to fly on a plane as a passenger. We're going to be a passenger. We have what's called positive space. They have to put us on. They have to put us on because we need to go, for example, from Denver to pick a place, I don't know, Chicago. And so we absolutely have to go there in order to work a plane, a flight from there to somewhere else. And so that's how, and it's not just Southwest, this is everybody. We all wind up deadheading at some point or another. And I'll tell you about my 4-day escapade over Christmas in a little bit. But so you understand the terminology of deadheading. A lot of times you'll be in a gate area and you'll see pilots and flight attendants in uniform, and they're boarding just like normal people. And we're sitting in seats like normal passengers. And it's not that we've just decided this is a lot of fun, we want to go home, but our company needs us to be somewhere else. And on occasion, unfortunately, the airline will have to boot a paying passenger off an aircraft in order to have a deadhead crew member on that plane, because if we don't get there, that means an entire plane load of people, they don't get somewhere else. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Good explanation. The end of what I was bringing up. Do you want to go, Dieter?
I just wanted to bring in that what usually makes flying so safe, and commercial aviation in particular, such a smooth experience in this particular case, because and you guys were just using that term IROPS, right? Irregular operations. This is just an unprecedented weather system that moved through, and it literally, the computer algorithms couldn't deal with all these cancellations one after another. And so some companies, some airlines were affected, like you said, Eric, more than others. But the whole, even as bad as it sounds, the whole aspect underneath is safety, keeping everybody safe and keeping everybody, yeah. So
exactly
go ahead,
right.
Eric.
I was just going to finish up with it, and compounding the poor Southwest guys' issues is they were trying to get on the phone with dispatchers and crew schedulers who also were looking at the same algorithms and the stuff go up and down, and they were having a very hard time getting human contact with somebody that could help them and provide them information so they could move. They can't just say, well, there's a plane, let's load it up, fire it up and go. the pilots and the dispatchers are equally responsible for a flight. The dispatchers, as we've mentioned before, issue the flight plans for the flight, and both the captain and the dispatcher sign that form electrically, agreeing that this is a way to operate a flight. And when they couldn't get in touch with their dispatchers and or the schedulers to go, they couldn't move. And with the system chopping and rebuilding trips, they quickly lost track of where people were, their legalities, when they would duty time out. So it was a mess. But the last thing I want to say is we fly Southwest all the time with you guys, and you know how they treat us. They treat us fabulously, and they bend over backwards to help us. The crews on the airplane and the gate agents are just fantastic, and have been nothing but since we started. And this was something that they were powerless to rectify because of the rebuilds and these trips and their inability to contact the company. They were completely handcuffed. And we've all done, I mean, in 30 years, I've done it a few times. I call it the walk of shame, when the airplane's broken and you get off with your stuff and you're going to the hotel, and you know the 100 whatever people there at the gate, I mean, they know this is a bad sign.
And I had that this last trip. And I wanted to add, Jim Duke made a real cogent observation. As bad as this storm was, it happened over Christmas weekend. And so, as Eric said, it's a terrible, terrible domino effect. You know, something happens in Denver as far as flights and snow and everything else. And all it does, it just ding, ding, dings all the rest of the dominoes all the way across the country to the East Coast. Mm-hmm. And so whatever bad is happening way over here, everybody eventually has the effects of mm-hmm. that cycle of where are the pilots, where are the flight attendants, where are the planes, we don't know. We're on hold for 12 hours. I mean, we're not talking about the passengers being on hold. We're talking about the pilots and the flight attendants. One of them was, I saw on Facebook, had been on hold with crew scheduling for over 23 hours. I mean, that just gives you an idea of how difficult it is for us as crew members to try to get a hold of our company to find out and say, hey, where am I supposed to be? You know, I need to be somewhere. But as Derek talked about the walk of shame, I had, if I can I throw in my trip story this Christmas?
Sure, go for it, Diane.
So I had a 4-day trip scheduled for this past weekend. I went out on Friday, the 23rd, and I had a deadhead, which is, we've already described, that the entire crew, the 4 of us, rode as passengers from Phoenix to Austin. And I'm just going to give the beginnings part of my story, because you're going to know, you're going to get the real feel of how bad things went. So we got to Austin right on time, and then we were going to have about 2 hours or so of wait time, airport appreciation time, as we call it, before we flew from Austin, and we took a plane to Oklahoma City. And we sat there in Austin and waited, and come to find out, the actual plane, the aircraft that we needed in Oklahoma City was flying from Chicago, which already Eric had alluded to as far as the situation up in Chicago in the snow. It was supposed to go from Chicago to Aspen, Colorado, and then from Aspen to Austin. And it was delayed for obvious reasons, and delayed. So that plane that was supposed to come into Austin earlier in the day did not get to Austin until about 1:15 in the morning. And so we had sat, the 4 of us crew had sat for more than 7 hours in the gate area in Austin waiting for our plane. By the time we finally left Austin to go to Oklahoma City, we pushed and flew there. We got to Oklahoma City and got to our hotel rooms. It was almost 4:00 in the morning. That's how late it was. What that means, as bad as that sounds, we're required to have 10 hours of rest. That's a FAA regulation for the pilots and the and the flight attendants. What that meant was our release time was 3:31 in the morning. That was our release time. We could not legally report again until 1:31 the next day. What that meant was every single flight we were supposed to do the next day, we couldn't do. We could not leave legally Oklahoma City until at least 1:31, which meant that the last flight that left Oklahoma City for my airline was at 12:30 in the afternoon. So that meant we could not do any flight the rest of the day. So instead of spending one night in Oklahoma City, we had to spend 2 nights. We stayed in our hotel room. So that's the kind of disaster that we're talking about. And then we wound up eventually getting back to Dallas. Our captain was pulled off a flight and he had to fly somewhere else because they needed a captain somewhere. We lost our first officer. He had to go somewhere else. The other flight attendant and I got pulled off. All of a sudden, we were supposed to go to Shreveport and back. And we got on the plane. We did our pre-flight. And then all of a sudden, we were contacted by our crew schedulers and said, no, you're not doing that. And so we had to pull all of our bags together in our coats. And just as Eric was saying, we all had to walk off the plane and we had a whole gate load of people. And at that point, as we're coming off, half a dozen of them all looked at us and said, this doesn't look good. The crew is getting off the plane. And we had several people come up to us, the other flight attendant, myself, and said, what's going on? And we said, well, we're needed somewhere else. And basically where we were needed was eventually at another hotel in Dallas because we got pulled off of everything. And so then we spent the night in Dallas and came home the next morning. So in 4 days, I was originally scheduled for 9 flights, 2 of them deadheads. I was supposed to work 7 flights. I worked 1. I worked 1 flight.
And that's so difficult to understand, I think, for those of us who don't fly a whole lot, but then, you know, holiday times and we want to visit with family.
Yeah. For
right?
everybody to understand. I mean, and what Eric was saying, I mean, the crew, it's not just the passengers, but the crews, a lot of them, they were supposed to be home too. They can't get home. So they're stuck somewhere for 2 or 3 days in Denver and they live in Atlanta. So the crews, the pilots and the flight attendants are here and they were supposed to be done with work and now they're not done with work and they can't get home. So
They were. Oh, go ahead, Dieter.
That's just a question that Tracy and a couple of comments. My wife was one of 4 flights out of LAX today. That's pretty crazy. And then another one is why were the pilots and dispatchers unable to communicate and plan? And I think you alluded to that earlier, Eric, right? It's just the sheer volume of cancellations that got processed so quickly that by the time anybody realized what's going on, the system was already.
It piled up on the dispatchers in a logarithmic scale, and just the heap of canceled stuff between them trying to coordinate with scheduling where they were going to send anybody became so extreme that they couldn't pull them out one piece of straw at a time from the bale, and they did send some airplanes as manually. The dispatcher and the pilot worked out the legalities of the flight plan. When the scheduler said they would be fine, the crew would be legal, and they went. But going back to that from an automated process is extremely slow and difficult. And it was just a system dogpiling on them, making them handcuffed. And I do want to say once again, the way we've been treated by Southwest, when you see pilots, flight attendants, and gate agents tell them how much you love them and appreciate the way they treated us, because they were powerless to do anything about this. And even if we went back to the theoretical, with all the IT systems holding up, when you have a storm like that moving through, a schedule is built around weather that you can generally operate in fairly high speed. But when you have to do that, remove snow, limited taxiways open, it slows down your ability to park, slows down your ability to get out. There's poor guys underneath the airplane trying to unload bags in weather that's not fit for man or beast. They're trying to unload and load, and then the airplane has to go out and get de-iced for a first stage and then get de-iced for a second stage. And every airplane flying is having to do that, waiting, going in and out of the de-icing line. It just slows things down so far. And the farther you go, the worse that slows down, notwithstanding any kind of IT meltdown.
Yeah.
And some places it's just as simple as they ran out of de-icing fluid.
Oh, sure.
Right there.
Yeah.
I mean, when it's that bad, and as Eric said, you de-ice and then you go taxi out and you try to leave, and then you're there too long, and he knows way better than I do. There's a time limit, and if you don't get going by the time thing hits, you got to go back and de-ice again, and so that takes more time, and it's just this incredible piling on, and the dominoes. Sometimes I think it's amazing that it works well, even when the
As
weather.
well as it does, yeah. Eric, here's a question from one of your admirers. How long until the backlog clears? By the way, that admirer is my beloved wife, Rebecca.
That's easy.
Yeah, so how long will it take to, because Jim Duke just messaged and he said that basically today Southwest canceled the flights from LAX to what was it, Palm Springs. So yeah, so, and as far as I know, there was no snow there, but it's all part of what's happening. So
The IT overload.
yeah, how long until all this clears up?
My answer is I have no idea. What I've heard them.
That's a good answer.
I couldn't begin to guess. What I've heard them report is that Southwest has to take the number of flights they dispatch and fly, take the volume down so far, like to 1/3 of their normal schedule, until that system can catch up, so that it knows where the crews are, knows where the planes are, and knows what legalities have and haven't been filled. And they have to take the schedule apart to a great degree until its system can catch up to that. And what I heard on the news today, the Southwest Union president and one of their IT people saying it will probably be after the first of the year.
Which is
and I hope by after the first of the year, they mean New Year's Day or the next day, not June 30th. But they need to take this down until the system can catch up and go, oh yeah, we know where everybody is. We know where those guys are. They've been in that hotel for 7 days, so they're zeroed out. They can go, okay, but right now it can't calculate legalities when it keeps dogpiling like that.
And talk about the fact that the weather in Palm Springs, maybe, and the weather in LAX, the weather's fine.
Yeah.
And the passengers, y'all out there, you need to know, it doesn't matter what the weather is like wherever you are. If there's no pilots, or the pilots and flight attendants that may be supposed to be working your flight from LAX to Palm Springs, where the weather's perfect, they may be stuck in Chicago because they were supposed to fly from Chicago to LAX to take a plane to Palm Springs, but they're not there. So and I appreciate the fact that's a hard thing for passengers to understand, because they're looking out the window going, God, the weather's fab. Why don't we have a plane? Why don't we have crew members? Doesn't matter. They're stuck, in Kansas somewhere under a snowdrift. And so that's the aspect about aviation, which can be very difficult. And then Eric was talking about legalities. The pilots and the flight attendants have certain limits as far as how much time they can be scheduled to fly. And then they have, when they quit flying, like I mentioned in my trip, we have a certain amount of time dictated by the FAA where we have to rest. And so again, even though you may have somebody there, when they time out, the pilots in particular, they can't fly. They are not allowed to fly legally because they've been flying for, Eric, what is it, 14 hours for you guys?
Oh, there's a widely variable equation for how that works, but
Yeah.
14 is generally outside, and I think you can bump to 16 if you're
If
nuts
you agree to it.
the last week. But yeah, that's pretty much the end of a duty envelope right there.
So there are time constrictions on the crew members on how long they can fly in the course of a day. And then when they're done, how much rest they are mandated to have before they fly again. And that goes back to safety. It goes back to safety.
And Diane brought up a real important point. If the crews hero it out and voluntarily accept a duty extension to cover a trip, that means when they get to the end point that day, they need a longer rest period and a shorter duty day the next day. So it'll continue to get cut down and cut down and cut down till they get caught up.
Right.
So we got a few more comments. So first of all, I got to back up to that original question that you were answering. Oliver Fry replied that was the wrong answer, and I think he spoke. I think he spoke for many of us.
Come on, Oliver.
Oh, Oliver, trust me on this one. That's the right answer. I really don't know. I'm not.
And then he also so I want one question from Tracy, but I also want to say Oliver's wife got lucky. He said had a co-pilot, but had to wait for a captain.
Sure.
From New Orleans, and they.
Yeah. Well, so what Diane had just said, Dieter, you were staggered a little bit there, so we jumped in,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
really good so far. But what Diane was just saying, when the airline's looking for crews, they very well might split flight attendants up, partial cabins, and they split captains and first officers up if they need a captain on one flight and a first officer on another. So they could easily have somebody in position ready to go, but the other position person is coming in from somewhere, or they believe they're recovering them from somewhere, and that split causes a delay.
And so another question, we've talked a lot about Southwest, but one question is, are other airline systems just as overwhelmed? And before any one of you answers that, I just want to remind that I think American Airlines has 15,000 pilots and crew, I believe.
Yeah.
So that's just one of the four really big ones. So there has to be a system like, an algorithm that is dealing with all of that, because you couldn't move 100,000 departures every single day in North America if there wasn't a really good system out there.
Right.
Which obviously is not infallible. But are the airlines also affected?
Sure. And they've all been bit at one time or another with an IT snag or hang up, and it can be perfect weather and a perfect day, and and I remember a few months ago Delta got hit for 2 or 3 days when they had a hiccup with their system, fortunately not over a holiday, and I think American and United have skated pretty well recently. They have theirs pretty well locked down and cleaned up, and Southwest is going to have to do some big investing in IT and re-examining the strength of their system and their ability to dispatch it. But as Diane pointed out earlier, they have tighter constraints because their system is built on extremely quick point-to-point dispatching, whereas the other carriers go into a hub, offload and load, and go out of the hub to satellite airports, back and forth out of the hub. And Southwest goes flying along in these strings from point to point to point very quickly. And so their system has to handle different sets of problems than the other guys because of the way they move their airplanes is different from the other major carriers.
Yeah, we have, for American and the other ones, when you go to a hub, there's a bunch of planes there I mean, there's a lot of planes, and sometimes there are extra planes. So if you need an extra plane, so to speak, because your plane is broken, a lot of times there's another plane there that you can take. And also, if in a lot of the hubs, in the bigger domiciles, there are pilots and flight attendants on reserve. And so if you are missing a pilot or missing a flight attendant or missing lots of them, the company can call up and send a crew member to that particular aircraft to take over and to work the trip. But that's not necessarily the case with like Southwest, and they're flying from here to here to here to here, because they might not have a spare plane over here, or they might not have a spare flight attendant or pilot, depending on the circumstance. So I think there's an advantage to their system in some regard, but there are distinct disadvantages in others. So, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure they will you know, do what airlines do and take due diligence, you know, analyze, you know, what's happened and how they can improve it. And I want to do a quick shout out to Wendy Moy in our Facebook group, Birds of a Feather. We Wendy has been really active and with her flight club, and she's starting up again. So head over if you want to fly with somebody to either keep in the rhythm of going places in 2023. I think from what I have heard and from what I'm seeing in the Facebook group, these flights are always a lot of fun for the people that participate, and that's purely between, you know, you guys. Wendy usually flies, I think, out of Houston. That's where she's living in that area right now, and usually Southwest. So Eric saying first of the year, so maybe early 2023.
That's cute.
Maybe
Yeah, exactly. So thanks, Tracy. Yeah, that's what I hope that our show tonight really brings in a different aspect and a different perspective, because I mean, at the end, you know, no matter how great an algorithm is, it's human beings operating the planes, and not just the planes, even the people that service them and that clear the runways and, you know, deal with all of that. We're all human beings, and I know it's frustrating sometimes, especially, like I said, you don't fly that much, it's expensive, especially around the holidays, and you want everything to be perfect, and then if it doesn't go, you know, I know it's easy to project your own anxiety and your own anger onto the flight attendants and the gate agent, but they're in the same boat. They didn't ask for that either, and everybody, I'm sure, is doing their best to deal with customers all over the place. And I know in Buffalo, they actually only opened the airport today. Like that airport was closed for days. And I think they had 6 feet of snow there, which is insane. Yeah, it really is. So I mean, it is quite. I know that those crews work overtime, and I think giving them some love is a good idea, even when we're stuck at airports. You know, I always see people who make the best out of it, and then of course I see people who just have no filters and no self regulation whatsoever. But I think part of, you know, when I think about, you know, those of you who struggle with fear of flying and struggle with anxiety, to actually know more about airplanes, aviation, and flying, it's really a bonus when when you get into situations that are, not as we hope or expect them to be, like this.
This weekend, this weather over Christmas was historic. This was a really historic
Yeah.
disaster. But in general, when you fly in the winter, it always helps to be, as a passenger, to be a little more prepared. I mean, I grew up in upstate New York, and in the winter we kept a blanket, and we had this, that in the trunk just in case. And you have a little more preparation. And that really goes as well for flying. Bring some extra food, bring your patience, bring whatever else you need to bring on the off chance you're going to get stuck somewhere. And not that it always happens, but it's nice to have it. Although I say this is historic, this is unprecedented as far as the amounts of time that people are taking. So it's and as Dieter very, very wisely said, the gate agents, the people, the customer service folks, they're doing their best, and screaming and yelling at them isn't going to make anything go faster, believe me.
You should have worn your t-shirt that your brother sent you for Christmas. Her brother, who's a Marine, sent her a t-shirt that said, "Patience is what you practice when there are too many witnesses."
My brother knows me too well. He buried me, nearly killed me when we were kids, because he buried me in a snowdrift in the front yard when I was probably about 8. So yeah, I'm still going to get back at him. But I'm going to digress just a little bit, because I want to wish Captain Eric, tomorrow is his birthday. Happy birthday, Captain Eric.
Thank you. I hope to make that.
Yes.
I'm only 65.99, so there's no reason to panic.
64 days, yes. Happy birthday there, kiddo.
Yes, happy birthday there, Captain Eric. And on that note, next week, if all goes well, Captain Ron has made his way back to North America, back to oh, there. Tommy says also, happy birthday. Oh my God, you're getting showered with birthday love
that's
there.
so nice.
Yay.
That's awesome.
Thank you, everybody.
Good. A birthday's important.
Thank you, guys. Peter can see it all. I can't, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. You'll see it after. I'll share it with you after.
Okay.
All right. Well, then, if there's no more questions, then I'm going to say thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. And because this show really lives by your questions and what you wanna know about airplanes and flying and how to overcome your fears. So thank you. Have a great week. And
Happy New
does
Year.
that mean, is that a Happy New Year? Exactly. Happy New Year to all of you. Okay. All right. Bye, guys.
Wait.